How's everybody doing? All right. In the beginning, y'all were quiet. Now we're starting to pick up a little bit, which is nice. All right. So as the introduction said, my name is Jester James, and I'm here to talk about the lifelong adventure of learning cybersecurity and DFIR. Who here knows what DFIR means? So I don't have to explain. All right, we got a few hands, so DFIR stands for Digital Forensics and Incident Response. So in cybersecurity, a lot of folks, they like to talk about hacking and red teaming. The blue teaming side, the defensive side, is Digital Forensics and Incident Response, or DFIR for short. And I'm really here to, anybody watch Pulp Fiction, John Travolta memes? How did I get here? So, as the presentation and introduction had said, I graduated from Champlain College with a degree in computer networking and cybersecurity with a minor in digital forensics in 2020. So during the whole COVID coronavirus pandemic and all that jazz, so got to move back home with my parents as such, you know. Hi mom, hi dad, hi my sister. I love you all, 3,000. So after I graduated, I started working at IBM's X-Force Incident Response team, and just like Aaron's presentation today, one of our great partners is CrowdStrike, so really got to kind of leverage my experience out of the classroom and then really apply it in an industry-specific experience, doing exactly kind of what Aaron was talking about there, kind of looking at those Chinese cyber threats, Chinese cyber espionage, and doing a little bit of threat intelligence as well. And I'm going to be talking about how you can go and develop your own adventure of learning cybersecurity, digital forensics, and any niche you want in cybersecurity. So you can find me at Jester James on Twitter and Instagram, or jameskainth.com, and let's get started. So disclaimer, obviously is a presentation about how to. There's more than one way to do it, so I'm going to give you all a little bit of tips and tricks, a little bit of curriculum. I'm not going to lie, it's definitely in line with my website and YouTube channel and stuff along those lines. That being said, the presentation is titled The Lifelong Journey of Learning Cybersecurity. So a lot of folks, you know, they join cybersecurity, maybe they go a couple years and then they leave. You don't really see a lot of seasoned professionals in cybersecurity who have been around for maybe 10 or 20 years. And that's really because mental health has always been a thing, imposter syndrome. So I always like to add that mental health is important, so take care of yourself. Burnout is real. We're at a security conference, so technically we can still kind of say we're working outside of the shots here and there, but burnout is real, imposter syndrome is real, so disclaimer and shout out, take care of yourselves. So I'm going to just start off the bat here, going on the different phases. So lifelong journey, right, we have the beginner, intermediate, and advanced phases. So with a show of hands, I'm not going to call anybody out or ask anybody to kind of reply, but where do y'all kind of think you are just sitting in your chairs here and watching the presentation so far? You feel like you're over in the Charmander area, you're more of the War Turtle, or you're feeling you're a little advanced, you could be Blastoise there? Anybody for beginner? All right, we got some hands. Intermediate. Nobody's raising your hands, come on. All right, so I'm going to say I'll be the astronaut in the presentation. I'll follow myself in between phase 2 and phase 3. I wouldn't consider myself advanced. Note that it's in quotes as well. Definitely, I feel like I'm a little bit more on the intermediate level, not towards a beginner, given the fact that I have gone and gotten a degree in cyber. So again, pause. I want to really open the crowd up, wake us up a little bit. Some things I want you all to think about as I'm going to be talking in our presentation is, what are your goals? Where do you see yourself in 1, 2, or 3 years? As any great life coach would say, if you're feeling down at life or you're not really sure where you're going or you're just floating through life, really you want to have a good plan laid out. So if you're going to college, right, they say they have your curriculum, or if you go to your job, they have your documentation to read and go to for a plan, a game plan to go and execute. So if you have a position you're aiming to be in, anybody looking to be CISOs out in the audience, future CISOs, Chief Information Security Officers? All right, there we go, yeah. I don't like CISOs because they get a little management-y. I like to stay technical and have a little bit fun. So that being said, the lifelong adventure and adding to setting goals, right, you want to make sure you're setting SMART goals, right? So be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time managed. So if you're going from absolutely no technical experience, no experience in cybersecurity at all, then you're going to want to make sure you're setting your goals up and you're making sure they're smart goals, and at the same time, you're human. Be kind with yourself, be kind to others, because burnout is real, imposter syndrome is real. So let's get straight to it. I'm going to go on talking about phase one, starting out beginner. What are some of those things that you're going to want to get into first if you don't know anything about cybersecurity? And those would be the fundamentals. So as with any new position you get, you go into college, your first year, anything that you start that's new, you're nervous. You're drinking from a fire hose, a bunch of new information. But in cybersecurity and computing and technology, the key component is to master the fundamentals, because the fundamentals don't change. So in my experience so far in the industry, and also in watching various presentations and speakers and talking with speakers, is that all of these concepts that are more kind of advanced or explained, all are built on those fundamentals, on those foundations. So if you master the fundamentals, then you're setting yourself up for success in the long term. That way, you can go and really skyrocket your career forward into really anything, and cybersecurity is your oyster, as they say. So all the information will come at you, but embrace the fire hose. It's part of the fun of it. And what are those fundamentals? That'll be computer networking, network and system administration, and my personal plug would be setting up your own lab environment. So anybody here know a little bit about like networking or network administration? Any network administrators out there as opposed to pen testers or incident response analysts? I see some folks. So those are the folks that are keeping your network alive. Shout out to the RootCon network team and Black team in the backhand, keeping their internet up, keeping our presentation live. Because in computer networking, right, your foundations, your fundamentals, the thing you're going to cover, right, in order for you to defend a computer network, you need to know what is a computer network, how to build it, and how to defend it, and things along those lines, right? So the fundamental topics, I'm sure some of y'all are rolling your eyes because it's an annoying topic, but subnetting. Subnetting is one of the most critical skills that you can learn in cybersecurity, because subnetting is a component of how you're going to get an IP address. An IP address is a classic buzzword. Anybody knows, anybody, common consumer knows what an IP address, and it's the internet address, right? However, subnetting is what is going to allow you to get your IP from multiple different computers. So you're going to go talk about routing, firewalls, NAT, packet tracer, all these kind of buzzword things is what you'd be diving into in the beginning, and you can open them up, and your fundamental network stack, your network protocols is TCP/IP. And so when you go and you do something like you go to the car hacking village and you learn about CAN bus and the CAN protocol, you learn about how that's overlaid on top of the TCP/IP foundation, and how all of these technologies that are being produced and created today are all built on these foundations. So definitely go, and you want to make sure you're mastering your fundamentals of TCP/IP, NATing, network and system administration. New technologies have come out, so network and system administration, that's a job in itself. So folks have been creating new technologies to support that niche as well. So Ansible, Docker, Cloud, Kubernetes. And my personal plug, when you're first starting out, is to set up your own lab environment. So I want to make sure that whether it's cloud or a virtual environment, or maybe you have a server and you're going to go and set up a physical lab environment, definitely go. I'll be making a little bit of push of that in the presentation, because as we're presentation in Aaron's presentation, he's talking about threat intelligence and defending. You ought to have to raise your awareness. So in order for you to raise your awareness, you got to know what's normal, right? So set up your own lab environment. You'll be able to kind of visualize what's normal. That way, when you see something that's sus or evil, it's easier for you to identify. That being said, the lifelong journey, right? There's new technologies coming out every day, like Docker, Cloud, Kubernetes. So how do you stay up to date? Personally, these are just my recommendations. I use Feedly. Feedly is a tool that basically collects all of your news. You can have 500,000 news sources, collects them all in RSS feeds, and you can read them all in one place 5 times as fast. And also a big push for podcasts. I love listening to podcasts in the morning because it gives you the daily news, anything that's new. And for my job as an incident response analyst, if there's a new vulnerability or a new exploit out, like say SolarWinds or the Active Directory vulnerability that was in the prior presentation, I'll hear about it on that podcast. That way when I go to work, I'm already primed to the teeth with what I'm looking for, and I have a little bit of a foot ahead there. That being said, new technologies always come around, so you have to embrace them. And to be honest, you don't really have a choice. So shout out to Recorded Future and my friend Alan here. You'll be hearing from him next, but I wanted to shout out Recorded Future because they do a really great podcast in the morning called The Record, and also The Cyberwire, and those are two of my favorite podcasts that I listen to every morning. So like I was saying before, everything adds up. So you want to start with a really strong foundation. So when you're going and you're doing something like what I do, which is incident response, you're monitoring a network. So I get to use what Aaron's company, CrowdStrike, they produce a EDR platform, which is an endpoint detection and response platform that essentially you deploy it in your company environment, so every single computer, even your iPhones, are getting tracked, and all that data is going to the company, to the Security Operations Center. And as an incident response analyst, I get to look at all that telemetry, I get to see all that data. Now, if I didn't know anything about networking, it would be like I'm reading the Rosetta Stone, a totally different language, IP addresses, protocols that I don't recognize, I don't know. And even still, on the job, there's things that I don't know. You'll never really know everything, and that's part of the beauty of being alive, the discovery. So again, really strong push to start with the foundations, because when you're starting out in cybersecurity, it's really, really easy for you to get excited and you're very passionate. The fire is light inside of you and you love it. And you might say, oh, I want to be a hacker. I want to go. I want to do offensive security. Go get my OSCP. Shout out to Offensive Security. I think they're one of the vendors over there. But if you can't go and do your foundations, your fundamentals, then you're not going to do as well when you get there. So you have to be patient with yourself. I have to be patient with myself. And practice the foundations. Make sure you build your foundations up. That way, when you want and you are at that level, that intermediate level, you've evolved, you're no longer Squirtle, you're War Turtle, you're not Charmander, you're Charmeleon. You can go straight to those advanced topics that you can go and build off of, and then the real fun starts to begin. So I've said it enough times and I'll say it again. Start with a strong foundation because everything compounds on itself. So as I mentioned before, my push, what I do is digital forensics and incident response. So as an incident responder, my job is to look in an EDR platform and look at all that network telemetry from a computer environment. So don't delay, start threat hunting today. I'm making a massive push for all of y'all to set up an elastic stack on your own computers, and that'll take you 20 minutes. Trust me, I got YouTube videos for it. So go to jameskainth.com. You can go and check out my YouTube channel. You can check out my website. I'll spin you up an elastic stack in 20 minutes on your computer on an Ubuntu 22 OS or various OSs. And if you want any assistance with that, you can feel free to reach out to me, or you can come up to me after the presentation is done. And the component to that is really for incident response and really for threat hunting. So Falcon is a really great tool that I've leveraged quite a bit, that's produced by CrowdStrike, and it's a threat hunting tool because it allows you to see literally everything in your computer environment. That being said, not everything is evil, right? So how many of y'all have your iPhones? Maybe you've got iMessage data going in there. Maybe you have Safari data going in there. But how are you going to see what's different between a regular user in the company and an attacker? You have to know normal in order to find evil. So starting earlier, the earlier the better, which is why I make this push for folks that are even in high school. I've gone and I've talked to some high schoolers as well, and they've spun up an elastic stack and they don't know what they're looking at all. They're on TikTok. They can barely sit in front of the computer for 15 seconds, really. So the component here is to really start threat hunting and set up on the elastic stack because it'll help you know normal. You'll be able to know what those living off the land binaries are, what those living off the land scripts are that Aaron was mentioning earlier. And once you know those and you familiarize yourself with them, it'll be a lot easier for you to find the attacker and the needle in the haystack. So don't delay, please start threat hunting today. So at this point, right, we've mastered the foundations. We've started threat hunting. We're at a good point. We're Jester James here. We're up on the stage and we're a little bit in that intermediate. Now once you have that insight, right, you've got threat hunting, you've got your elastic stack spun up. Now you can see all that data coming in. You didn't see that data before. There's stuff in there that you didn't even know your company would be able to see. You didn't even know that this was being tracked on the operating system level. So you start to get this new perspective, new eyesight, new vision. You can see into the forever, really. So the component to that I mentioned is because it really comes out into the fact of real life as well. The buzzword everybody likes to say in cyber is operational security, or OPSEC. And the component to that is when you start to get into cybersecurity and you learn all these things, you get paranoid, you get scared. And, you know, I always like to say it's not paranoid if it's true. In Aaron's case, I'm sure China is now on his laptop, so. That being said, in OPSEC, you'll have very different things that you start to think about. So for this presentation, for example, I noticed, I think, Aaron, you plugged in using USB-C, right? I plugged in using HDMI. However, if I was in China, maybe I would use like a HDMI to USB-C adapter, or I would be using, if I'm plugging in my iPhone, I would be using a USB blocker. So essentially what this USB blocker device does is it blocks the line of copper on the USB-A chip side from reading and writing data, essentially. So it'll turn your iPhone charger wire, your cable that you can connect to the computer, into a dumb, just simple charging wire. And small moves like that, that'll help you out in the long term, because next thing you know, China might be asking Aaron to present, and Aaron, I'll give this to you so you can go to China and not have to worry about some things. So that being said, now you've got the sight, right? You can see. Going from Padawan to Jedi Knight, how are you going to take that and run with it and keep running? Because as I was mentioning earlier, new technology keeps evolving, which means you're going to have to keep on staying up to date. You have to learn new things, new technologies, and all of these are in an effort to make your job better, your daily life better. So at this point, once you have your foundations mastered in cybersecurity, you can really go any route you could want. So the industry is your oyster, as I've said. So if you want to do red teaming, so hacking, anybody know about like X-Force Red? I think when I speak of IBM's X-Force, a lot of folks, usually they know about X-Force Red more because they're known as the red teamers, the hackers, the attackers. They get all the good press. I want X-Force Incident Response up here, the blue teamers, the defenders. They should be getting some good press too. But if you want to get into pen testing, Hack the Box is a free resource. The OWASP Top 10. So OWASP, who here knows about OWASP? Raise your hands. Some of y'all, all right, cool. So OWASP is the Open Web Application Security Project, and they focus on web applications and web security. So really, you can go and become an attacker, practice exploit development, and your red teaming skills using Hack the Box and learning about OWASP 10, and among other things. Now, to do what I do in doing incident response or security operations, you're going to want to learn more about SIEMs, EDR, MDR, and really log analysis. So SIEMs are a security incident and event management systems and endpoint detection and response systems. Really, those are just the tools that you have to deploy in order to see everything. So security operations, really log analysis, you're looking at the screen all day, but you're basically a digital detective. You are a digital Sherlock Holmes, as I like to call myself. Next level up, maybe you want to combine the two, which is another great thing. So another great thing that I've recently noticed in the industry is that we're not only doing red teaming and blue teaming anymore. It's evolved to really be purple teaming because, as Aaron was mentioning in his presentation before, ransomware and the cyber attackers, it's not like the movies anymore. They're not one-offs, and we don't have folks who are just going and attacking kind of one-offly. They've developed and they've created themselves to the point in which they're a business model. I've been working a lot of it at a time with my brother Josh. He's been teaching me a lot about business management, and I've really learned a lot about these business models. And in my job as an incident response analyst, I can see clear as day evidence, just like the presentation prior, referencing that these APTs, these advanced groups like China, Russia, they're all forming and they're attacking and they're doing their operations like a business. So they have a business model behind it. That might not be as bad as it sounds, but when you're down in the trenches, it's just like a service. Hacking as a service, ransomware as a service. It's pretty problematic, but to be honest, I feel like a lot of the professionals in the industry that have been around, they were expecting this. That being said, just like the push and the last message from my friend Aaron, he's telling you about raising that awareness. You want to get into threat intelligence. You want to be able to discover those attackers because your typical basic skills that you started off with are no longer effective. That's why we cover in the foundations, right? You want to do the living off the land binaries, the typical tools that are on your environment regularly. Once you're familiar with those, then you can find those advanced persistence threats. You'll be able to see things like indicators of compromise and TTPs, which are those tools, tactics, and procedures. So we had a whole presentation about China. There could be a whole other presentation about Russia. Talking about APTs, right?
Hello. There you go. Cheers. Thank you.
I'll take your brain to another dimension. So, speaking of monitoring threats proactively in real time, there's a bunch of the different EDR tools that are out there. So none of these vendors that are on the slide are sponsors. So my vendors on the other side there, take note. That being said, Aaron from CrowdStrike. CrowdStrike is up there. I've talked about CrowdStrike a lot, but there's so many other platforms out there. So if you notice on the presentation, I mentioned the EDRs. So we got Carbon Black, we got CrowdStrike, we got Cybereason, and we have OpenEDR and Wazoo. So CrowdStrike, Carbon Black, and Cybereason are paid business-level EDR solutions that provide that monitoring of threats proactively and in real time. So that being said, you want to get that experience using these platforms, or at least one of them, as soon as you can once you get into the industry, because once you know one of them, you kind of essentially know them all on the functional level. That being said, some of the tools do have their own syntax, but I've definitely done a lot of this, but big shout out to CrowdStrike and Falcon because their back end is Splunk, and Splunk is their syntax is pretty straightforward and easy to learn. That being said, there are the paid ones, but Wazoo and OpenEDR are the free and open source equivalents of EDR solutions that you can go and leverage in your environment. And with that, we can go and turn that elastic stack that you started out with into an EDR solution. So if you notice, we got lasagna created here. So like a cursor here, you can see, essentially this is the elastic stack already. All we're doing is adding that additional Wazoo component, and you take your security operations that you have in your home lab from simple SIEM monitoring to EDR. You can go and take that endpoint detection and response and take it to the next level, where now you're not only looking at the telemetry of your network data, you can also respond. You can go and block a computer. You can go and block a IP address, and also you can see what applications are doing. So once you actually deploy the elastic stack, and why I think deploying an elastic stack on your own is so important, is because you start to take security back into your own hands. So all of y'all with iPhones in your hands, we noticed that one of the vulnerabilities out on the Chinese conference, right, they had an Apple vulnerability released for 3 months before it was known by Apple as a company. So once you start to take the security operations route, you can take security back into your own hands, and you could start looking for your own vulnerabilities and start to be more proactive about your own operations and what might be going on from the company's perspective. And I've noticed a lot of researchers and developers, that's kind of how they're discovering these exploits and vulnerabilities, is that they're simply security researchers that are practicing good operational security, and as such, in these vendors' products, like an iPhone, Android, or any software tool suite out there, they'll apply fuzzing to it, or they'll do what they do without any software and be secure about it. And that's when you start to realize that security, right, is a massive thing, and it's never going to go away, and that's where the paranoia gets built in. That being said, that's why we want to take that security back into our own hands. So again, don't delay, start threat hunting today, and if you have no idea what the elastic stack is, you don't know was JamesKainth.com, my YouTube channel, I've got a nice video that really sums it all up in about 20 minutes. So that being said, now you got those foundations and you're starting to get into my bias. So my entire presentation is a little bit leaning more towards the blue teamers, the defenders, because that's my position. I'm as an X-Force incident response consultant. I do forensics. I do that analysis. I do the memory forensics. I hunt for those IOCs, and I use these tools on the daily. So purple teaming is the practice of applying that red team mindset onto an environment. So you set your virtual machine up or your computer, you attack it as if you're a hacker, and then you do forensics on it. So you go and you do forensics and you see your own steps. That being said, the other component of purple teaming that's more reactive is that you can go in your environment, in your corporate environment, you set up things like honeypots, honey nets, and you name file names that are really standard file names that are secrets.txt or something. Even if it's secrets.txt and the file has rubbish in it, the attackers, just because the file name is secrets, they're curious. Just like us humans, we're all humans, we're curious. We'll click secrets.txt just to see what it is. So when you have your automated red teamer skills and some things along those lines, and you deploy your honeypots, your honey nets, you can deploy these fake files or trigger files, essentially, that'll trigger your EDR platform to say, all right, this flag was hit, your attacker's in your environment, let's get to work. That being said, there's a component of the reactive side now. In doing forensics, forensics is a whole other thing. In dead box forensics, there's dead box forensics, there's live forensics, there's memory forensics. So within dead box forensics, there's a lot of forensic artifacts. Your computers, right, your iPhones, what is actually behind the operating system? So some of those artifacts are the registry, event logs, Amcache. Anybody know registry, event logs? Some of them? I'm trying to see who my blue teamers are. Looks like we got a lot of red teamers out instead. That being said, now memory forensics is the live system. So back in the day, in forensics and incident response, they used to say pull the plug. They just turn the computer off, that's it, you're done. However, now we know that there's a lot of data that you lose when you pull the plug. You're nodding your head, thank you. So when you pull the plug, you lose the live data of memory. So memory forensics and using a tool like Volatility, I don't think I'm behind it, but Volatility is a free open source tool that allows you to read memory live, and you can see active network connections, active processes running, things that you wouldn't be able to see if you pulled the plug. Now this is so important because attackers do things like fileless malware. So you'll only be able to catch the attacker sometimes in memory. If they're a very sophisticated attacker, that will be the only time that you can catch them, in memory. So memory forensics is a thing. Do not go pulling the plugs on your computers if there's an attacker because you'll lose great forensic data. You never know what data you'll have. So that being said, big plug for some of these free and open source tools that I leverage on the daily. Autopsy is a forensic suite. FTK is a forensic suite. Recon's a nice tool for mounting images and perusing them like a write blocker, similarly to kind of the USB write blocker that I showcased. And then we have Loki. Loki is a really great, simple IOC and IR scanner. And what Loki does is it uses those signatures, those indicators of compromise, those Yara rules that we know about. So all of these exploits and vulnerabilities that are commonly known already, the things we know attackers are doing, the exploits we already know exist, they have signatures, we have rules. Those are the low-hanging fruit that you can apply Loki on a forensic image to, and you'll pull them out easy. Another great way for you to sift through your forensic data in an easier fashion. So that being said, I've covered quite a bit here. I've covered a lot of good niches and subtopics on those individual slides. So you start with computer networking, right? Computer networking, networking system administration, and those are your foundations. So if you're going from zero to hero, right? Not hero to superhero, but zero to hero, you start with your foundations, and that's that computer networking, network administration, and then maybe you spend a year or maybe a few months on that. You take a pause, break and reinforcement. Master those foundations, because once you do, then you could go in further down the road to security operations. That way when you're doing incident response, you got your elastic stack set up, you're looking in your SIEM, you're looking at Falcon, you know what you're looking at, and you could see what's normal from what's evil. And then maybe incident response, you spend 5 years doing that, you're 5 years sitting in the environment, and you get bored with it. Because essentially, another thing that attackers do, some of these nation governments, they are not looking to obfuscate so much. Once their end goal might be to steal data or deploy ransomware. They might be obfuscated in the beginning, but then afterwards, when they're at that stage of deploying ransomware, they don't care. They're gonna make a lot of noise and you'll be able to see it. So essentially in incident response, you see the attackers doing the same thing. You see a lot of C2s, you see a lot of Metasploit, you see a lot of Cobalt Strike, and things along those lines. So they all do the same thing, and it kind of gets boring. I am not, as an intermediate astronaut in the previous slide, right, I can't even imagine this being boring. However, some of the folks that have been in the industry for 5, maybe 8, 10 years, they start to get bored with it. And then they'll go and they'll switch from the blue teaming side to the red teaming side, and that's where they start to do that purple teaming, and then maybe they might get into digital forensics, so maybe they don't get bored, but new technology comes out. So like an iPhone forensics is totally different from computer forensics. Heck, Apple forensics is completely different from Windows forensics, because those are two different operating systems, not to mention the Linux operating system too. So that being said, once you do get to that point, there's no turning back. So once you're at that point, it's all about leveling up. It's all about learning new tools, building your toolbox. And for what I do as incident response, kind of like what it sounds like, incident response is when your company or your client, their hair is on fire. The hacking's going on. There's a threat in their environment. They're scared. They don't know what to do. They're not the experts. Might not have a security operations team. It could be a small mom and pop shop for all we know, and they don't have the security mindset or the headset that we do. So as an incident response consultant, one of the things that I get to be able to do is to come in with that process and procedure and that crisis management mindset. We get to calm them down and say, don't worry, we got this. Settle down, relax a little bit, focus on the things that are important. Your monetary losses, your HR, your sales, the things that you might not have worried or set up about because your incident response plan might have not been developed. So that being said, if you really like incident response, if you really like Aaron's presentation learning about the Chinese threat actors and threat hunting and threat intelligence, you might want to be an incident response analyst. The next presentation afterwards talks about ransomware and a lot more about threat hunting and threat intelligence, talking about C2s and really identifying those attackers. If you love all of these presentations and that's what you want to do, that little spark inside of you starts to ignite and you're like, that's it. I don't want to do red teaming. I don't want to be offensive security right now. I want to be a defender. I want to be a blue teamer. That's the route you'll go, and it'll be talking about that mindset. Taking care of incident response, because as an analyst, right, you're entry level, maybe you're first on the job and you're the incident response analyst, you're going to be nervous too because it's your first engagement. However, you can't let the client know that, and I learned that firsthand. So always cover your mindset, crisis management, and once you have your foundations and you have the elastic stack, setting up a home lab is a perfect thing to put on your resume and to talk about in interviews. So at that stage, if you don't already have a job, you can leverage all that experience for finding a job and finding a team that fits. And at this stage as well, you can see your potential and what's next while also being able to appreciate how far you've come because you have that techno site and you'll be able to see all these things that you didn't see before. You'll be what I would be calling a not average but a advanced consumer compared to a lot of other folks who don't care about security, right? The biggest thing about cybersecurity is making people care about cybersecurity and communicating it in a fun way. But mom and dad, they don't really care. They don't really know about cybersecurity as much as say we do. So at that point, right, it's our job to be able to go and practice that growth and protect them. So incident response analysts, if you're all into defending, hit me up because that's what I do and I'd be happy to help you all get into the industry. That being said, I'm going to talk a little bit about finding a job and some of the easier ways for you to break into the industry, right? So if you don't have any experience, maybe we're all at RootCon. So this is a primary opportunity for you to go and perform some networking. You can go and talk to folks that you're sitting next to, go and network with folks that are at the table, the booths, folks at the vendor booths. They might be selling their products, but maybe they have some position openings. So if you have your resume in the back pocket, you can go and slide that under the radar there and tell them, hey, I'm looking for a position and things along those lines. Now, I keep on saying it, I'm going to say it again, having your home lab, having a testing and practice environment for your own purposes is such an invaluable thing to have, and really, in order for you to be in the industry for longer than 5 years, I think it's a must. In my opinion so far, and I'm kind of reaching that stage, I think you have to have a home lab. Why? Because in order for you to practice these new exploits, these new vulnerabilities, you need to have a safe area to play around, a safe area to practice those red teaming skills you learn, a safe area to detect new detections, to build detections for Falcon, new detections for Wazoo. In order for you to really advance, you need a play environment. It's a playground, really, which is another reason why I love cybersecurity. I feel like I'm still a kid up here. That being said, there's a lot of free resources out there as well. A lot of my presentation, I cover about some of these paid suites, about Cyber Reason, things along those lines, Carbon Black, but there's a lot of free resources out there as well. I mentioned them as well in the presentation, ElasticStack, but SANS is really the organization that's very well known for producing information security training, and they do a lot of their defending training. They're known for the blue teaming training, the defenders training, versus offensive security. The folks that are over at OSCP, behind the wall, they focus a little bit more on red teaming and offensive security, hence the name. That being said, SANS has a lot of paid training, but they have a lot of free posters and things along those lines. So a lot of words that I've used like know normal and find evil, that's actually the title of a SANS poster that I use on the daily. There is so much forensic artifacts and good forensic knowledge on those posters that at some point I'm gonna print them out and I'm gonna put them on my bedroom wall. Kids have Captain America on their wall, I'll have that too. But those SANS posters, those are going up for sure. So that being said, if y'all are looking for a job opportunity or anything along those lines, or you want to build your ElasticStack or build your resume up a little bit, feel free to reach out to me because I personally do have that experience back at Camp Champ. I was a peer career coach in college, so I'll be able to do all that resume finessing, cover lettering, and show you all that building LinkedIn and networking and get you a job sorted. So that being said, even though you might have your job already, I've got my job. Everybody in the industry experiences imposter syndrome. And I talked a little bit about mental health, but I want to talk about imposter syndrome specifically because even being up on this stage, it feels like I don't belong being here. There are folks that are 10 times better than me. They might know a lot better than me, but I realize that essentially imposter syndrome actually is a good thing. You have to fight that fear because it's a response for your growth. So once you actually start to feel that imposter syndrome, you can actually start to appreciate it because you're like, all right, I feel like an imposter, I'm doing something right then. So key elements to tackle that is really to just have that plan. You gotta visualize success. The fact that we acknowledge our potential makes it that much closer to reality. So all of our heroes as well, right? Starting out, they weren't who they were that we know them today. Captain America, he did not have the hammer until maybe Avengers Age of Ultron, or so the Russos say. But in Endgame, we saw him rock Mjolnir and really go to town with that. Batman, the new Batman movie, we see a younger, more grittier Batman. And anybody know Dunmachi by chance? All right, I'm not gonna explain that reference then. So as you get better, that means your problems are gonna get harder. That's the nature of growth, you know? As you become a better hero, the villains get stronger. And any troubleshooting, any problem solving, it's as simple as just breaking it down. You got a big problem, split it up into two parts. Split those two parts up, and you just break any big problem you might have, anything that's making you nervous, anything that you might have an idea that's big and causing you any issues or anything along those lines, any illusions of grandiosity, you can go and break them down into those smaller chunks. That way, you can go and tackle them one at a time. When you're getting a pizza, right, you don't eat the whole thing, you eat that one slice at a time. So at this point, right, we're basically covered through the intermediate, but you notice I didn't really get into the advanced stage too much. But there's a reason for that, so let's go. Once you have those foundations, you got those generic knowledge going on, you can go and learn all the things. So you're a Padawan Knight now you can go and become that Jedi Master. Things that require what folks would say, quote unquote, advanced research. And getting to this point, right, it takes time. You have to be patient with yourself. You can go forensics, all the things. You can learn reverse engineering, red teaming and exploit development. All of these things I talked about, they're all niches and industries of themselves. So there's no way for you to go and master one thing, really, unless you spend the time to master it. There's a saying of jack of all trades, master of none. As an incident response analyst, I'm a bit of a generalist because that's kind of what we have to be in order to detect attackers. So, jack of all trades, master of none. It's a good thing mom and dad didn't call me Jack. No offenses to any Jacks out there. That being said, we also have niche DFIR. So even in digital forensics and incident response, I'm an IR analyst, and these are these subtopics that you can really focus and become an expert in themselves. So these are the things that you can go in the industry, you spend 10 years in the industry, you can go and focus on things like industrial control systems. We talked about like airplanes, aviations, drones, mobile devices, iPhone forensics, IoT. Your fridge will get hacked next year. Who knows? Your thermostat, the Nest thermostat. You got IoT applied every day, everywhere. Cloud security, cloud forensics, blockchain. How many of y'all are on the blockchain? Bitcoin. There we go. All right. There's so many niches in cybersecurity. Cybersecurity has a problem of hiring. We need more folks to be able to be defenders. And all of these niches as well, there's not enough support within them. And that being said, furthermore, technology is still progressing. More technology is on the way. Quantum computing, AI, machine learning. The future is wild, but it's going to be a really fun one. So you notice I have advanced in quotes. Why is advanced in quotes? It's because I've noticed nobody in the industry considers themselves advanced. So I noticed nobody really raised their hands when I asked anybody who was advanced. And that's because of the fact that we have that imposter syndrome, but also because of the fact that becoming an expert in the security takes time. So when you do get to that point in which you might feel like, or you can consider yourself a little bit more advanced because you've been in the industry so long, you can go and kind of consider yourself a little bit of a wizard, or other folks that don't have that experience, they'll look at you like you're a god. You have all this experience, all this knowledge, all of these new things that I don't know to do. You're a wizard, like it's insane. And you really start to put people on a pedestal. One of the things I've really learned within the past couple of years is to stop doing that. And the reason for that is because security needs to stop being wizards trying to impress other wizards. So John Strand, who was an old SANS instructor, but he has his own company, Black Hills Information Security. Anybody know John Strand? Some folks, all right. So John Strand, he's got this tweet, and I brought this down because it's a really good sentence that just hits home the point that I'm making. Security needs to stop being wizards trying to impress other wizards. And I love it because he says, focus on the fundamentals. Because the fundamentals never change. Think TCP on IP. All of your network protocols, they're built on the essential function stack of that. And you can go and you can read RFCs for protocols, or requests for comments, which are the big, long documents that are on the internet that detail how these new protocols are getting created and things along those lines. So your iPhone has AirPlay and CarPlay and things along those lines. You can learn how that is being leveraged and built on top of the TCP IP model. So let's recap, because I think I got a couple minutes here, and we're getting made really good timing here, but covered a lot in the presentation. This slide, the right portion of it, if you noticed, it's literally just everything from the slides all put on this one slide. Cybersecurity is such a big industry, then you can go and fall down the rabbit hole, or the funnel in this case, and land anywhere. So once you start out, like I said, it's a lifelong adventure of learning cybersecurity and digital forensics and incident response. You master your foundations, your fundamentals, you'll learn a little bit about everything to cover everything below. So computer networking, you'll go down, you learn about network system administration, then you go into security operations, then you'll go to purple teaming, and then you could go to DFIR, and then you could go and do niches. So going from zero to hero allows you to become a generalist at first, and then specific. And then, just like Captain America, you'll feel a little bit worthy, or in the case of Thor, he needs a new hammer. You'll get that lightning strike, and the fire inside will keep on burning, and next thing you know, it'll be one of y'all up here at RUCON. That being said, I pitched a little bit before, but I have a website, I've got a YouTube channel, jameskainth.com. I do offer freelance service offerings and things along those lines, so if you ever find yourself in your iPhone acting a little weird, maybe you feel like you need a little incident response going on, your computer's been hacked, and you don't want to go and pay for a big company like IBM or something along those lines, because those companies really cater to organizations, you can feel free to reach out to me. I'll help you out there. If you want to help you build your home lab, Maybe you don't want just to do the Elastic Stack. Maybe you also want to do a red teaming environment as well, so you can start hacking and attacking. I can help you set up that, as well as web design. I have a website. You can have a website too. Easy peasy. Career services, resume review, all those things. I talked about it before. I do offer services for that, so quick pitch for that. Reach them out to me at jameskainth.com or Jester James on Twitter. And with that, please keep in touch as well. Jester James on Twitter, jameskainth.com. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Jester's Castle. You can also become a Jester yourselves. Reach out to me. I've got about 40 stickers left over, so if you want to trade stickers, you can come over and I'll make you an indebted Jester there. But I'm going to end my presentation this way, and I've said it a lot of the times, but the fact that we acknowledge our potential makes it that much closer to reality. Thank you very much.